Good morning, everyone. I like this. As Vernon said last week, yeah, not so bad. Sometimes it's way one side, way the other. But nope, people on both sides. I love it. So for our guests, I'm Aaron. And so today's message, seeking the old paths. And as I was putting this message together, I did a lot of reminiscing for some reason, thinking about the old paths, going down that way. And you'll just have to indulge me for a bit. So when I was young, or younger, and long before I could drive legally, I would get on my bike and I would ride. Just ride. Go all over the place. Now, I lived in a little town called Antioch, right up in northern Illinois. And the town had 5,000 people in it. Today it's almost over 3 times that. But back then there was a subdivision and a bunch of forests or hills or farms. We called the forest woods, the woods. But they were scattered subdivisions, and there was all these little tracks between them to get in between them. Now, if you wanted to go, if I had to go anywhere outside of my little subdivision, Morley's, I had a lot of reminiscing. Just all these things came back to me. But if I had to go anywhere outside of my little slice of the world, I had to ride my bike and go down between these woods and these forests, down these paths and these trails. If I wanted to go to a friend's house or a local place we all called the Seven Hills, I had to go through there. And from my house to the arcade at the Ben Franklin uptown was 4 miles. 3 miles at least of that were on trails. Just had to take the path. And where I lived, we lived way out on the west side of town, out by the lakes. And so, of course, you're by the lakes, that's the low part, and town was up on the hill. And so from my house to town was uphill the whole way. But if you rode those trails, you felt like it was no problem at all. You were riding, it was smooth, you could get to where you wanted to go, and you felt great. But as long as you stayed on those paths, you felt like you were going downhill and gaining speed. But you had to stay on those established paths. It was smooth sailing as long as you did that. But if you got off the path, if you decided you knew better, and you trekked out down an unknown trail, took the main roads, you want to do that on a bike, or blazed your own new trail, it almost never ended well. Even if you did finally get to your original destination, you were almost certainly worse for wear, hot and sweaty or cold and wet, had to cross creeks that you didn't know were in those woods that you tried to go across, crashes, flats, the path was not smooth, bumps and bruises. And if you inadvertently went off the path, not on purpose, not of your own volition, you prayed like mad that you would find the path again because it was so much easier on that established path, and nobody liked those. You were just in the woods, and now you're on the same woods on an unknown path, and the noises were different and scarier. Just totally new territory, even though it's the same place. So that place I mentioned called Seven Hills was actually an abandoned family farm that was straddled the Wisconsin-Illinois border. So it was in battle for a long time. Nobody ever took care of it. But we rode that place because it actually had 7 hills. And it was like a dirt bike track. You could do motocross, you could do BMX, you could do everything you wanted, except we didn't have the safety barriers or any referees or no rules. It's just, the only rule was you stayed on the paths. Because if you didn't, you would end up not doing well. So, when any of us would get our new bikes, we'd go to the 7 Hills as soon as we could. Every kid had to get their new bike, and you had to go to 7 Hills to prove yourself. Because we all know when you get a new bike, you ride faster and you jump farther, right? Just like when kids, you get new shoes. You can run faster and jump higher. The new shoes are all about it. Well, as long as you stay on the paths, you could ride that track and you could go home victorious. Felt great. If you got off the path, you were lucky to walk home with a broken bike and bruised ego, of course. When you were on the old tried and true paths, even at night, it seemed like they had a light of their own. You ever walk down a path at night? As long as you're on the path, it's like it's glowing right in front of you, as long as you're paying attention, if you're where you're supposed to be. It just lights up. But as long as you keep your eyes on it. Even during the brightest day, if you got off the path, and got out into the woods, the shadows would try to swallow you up. You could get lost pretty quick. So I spent many years riding those trails and experienced all those ups and downs and broken bikes and victories, and had a lot of fun with that. And I really enjoyed going down that memory lane with that. Those paths I rode on were guiding me, and I had the freedom of riding my bike, but was only safest and happiest within the confines of the paths. So there's freedom, yet there's rules. Now, I'm all grown up, well, almost. And yet there are still paths, destinations, places to be, and ways to get there. Now I'm no longer talking about the physical paths or means of transportation. Everyone in this room, everyone we know, everyone we don't know, all of humanity is on a path heading to a destination. Which path goes where? In Matthew 7, it talks about those paths. Matthew 7, 13 and 14. Jesus is talking here, and he says, "Enter ye at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction. And many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it." Those paths were narrow, but if you stayed on them, you were safe. You were going in the right direction. You'd get there. So you got two paths, straight and narrow, broad and wide. You could be peculiar, or you could go with the crowd. Now, the path has many forks, and you must choose the correct one all the time. The path diverges off here and there. The choices appear identical at first sometimes. You look at the two choices, and up around the next bend or up to the next hill, they look the same. How do you know which path to go on? Wouldn't it be great if there was a sign, some flashing lights, a billboard saying, "Don't go that way"? We do have a guide. It's our Bible. Okay? We do have that guide. Now, our Bibles are the ultimate guidebook for our journey. It specifically tells us what is the right way, which trail to take, what path we should be looking for. But that's not all. It also tells us how and why. Jeremiah 6, 16 and 17. "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and seek, and ask for the old paths, where is the good way, and walk therein. And ye shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein. Also I set watchmen over you, saying, hearken to the sound of the trumpet. But they said, we will not hearken." The old paths here are referring to the tried and true ways of complete obedience to the Lord. Over and over, the Lord tells us, and we're reading through scriptures downstairs in the Old Testament, over and over they were told, just follow me, do what I tell you, and you get all this. But he didn't leave that empty. He said, if you don't do it, here's what's going to happen. We go into these choices with our eyes wide open as long as we're looking at the guidebook. We know what to expect. And yet, even in Jeremiah, they chose not to. It's saying, ask for the old paths of their ancestors. And why? Because it is still considered the good way. And that is where they and we should be walking. Now remember, I said earlier, I was only safest and happiest when I was within the confines of the established trail. Same thing here. We should ask for the old paths because they are good, but there is something else we get, it says there. We get rest for our souls. Jesus said that exact same thing in Matthew. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, I said that I had that feeling of freedom while I was riding my bike, but only within the confines of that trail. Jesus is presenting a choice here. Freedom to choose which yoke or set of confinement we want to be under. The context here is speaking about choice of God, of man, or God's law. Man's law is a heavy burden in this instance. But God's law, it's light. It's not a burden. Contrast that to it. In Mark, Jesus quotes the prophet Isaiah, Mark 7, 6 through 9. He answered and said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. For laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, the washing of pitchers and cups, and many other such things you do.' He said to them, 'All too well you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your tradition.'" So, we have God's law, man's traditions, man's law. But what is said about, we know that the man's law is a heavy burden, and he talks about it here. So what is said about God's law? And we sang a part of that during the choruses in Psalm 19. Psalm 19, 7 through 9. "The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether." So we know that the correct path to follow is the perfect law of the Lord. But what exactly does that mean? Again, we've got the guidebook. What law? Where is it found? Are we to keep all of it, or just parts that are fun and easy or convenient? I have been doing a lot of serious digging as of late. So if we are to walk in the old paths, if we are to be grafted into the family of God, if we are to be considered an heir in the family of Israel, if we truly believe the entire Bible is the inspired word of God, then more than ever I am convinced we should strive to follow all the rules of God that God has laid out for his people. Just like Jesus said earlier about his yoke, 1 John says it in this way, 1 John 5:3. "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome." But you say that, you get in a conversation, and many people will jump to that verse in Matthew to say we are under the new covenant. Matthew 5:17. "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill." And those same people will be like, "Quick, just look right there. Don't look anywhere else. Only at verse 17. Don't look before, don't look after. We just want to focus on that verse to get it to say what I want it to say." A few years ago, I spoke about being like the Bereans, how we should all strive to be more like them in their diligence to seek out and compare what they were hearing to what the word of the Lord actually said. They can hear it, but they wanted to make sure it lined up. So let's take a look. I'm going to practice what I preach, and let's take a look at that next verse with it. So Matthew 5:17 and 18. "Do not think I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot and one tittle will by no means pass from the law until all is fulfilled." All the law is still valid. Jesus says here that not one little part will pass away. Now, I am more and more convinced that all the law, all of the instructions are given to us for a reason, and we are obligated to keep all that we can. That is to say, all that we are not prohibited from keeping due to circumstances and situations beyond our control. We should strive to be keeping, observing, obeying, commemorating, and celebrating all God-given instructions in ways that please him. Now remember, God's law is perfect. It's not burdensome. Compare what our option is, as simply stated in Deuteronomy, found in what we commonly call the Torah, or the law of the book, the first 5. Deuteronomy 11:26 through 28. "Behold, I set before you today a blessing and a curse." So he's going to give us both. We're not going to go into this blindly. The blessing, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today. And the curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other gods which you have not known. You have another choice, another comparison. The Bible's full of comparisons. They give you this or that. Blessing or curse, life or death, you choose. Isaiah and Micah both speak about following God's ways in the latter days. I'll go to the Micah verse, Micah 4, 1 through 2. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and peoples shall flow to it. Many nations shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his paths. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. A week or so ago, I was still trying to figure out what I was going to speak on today. I knew this day was coming, so I had to kind of think about it. My wife suggested that I choose something I wanted to know more about. Study it out, present it to you. So I started with that in mind and quickly realized something very profound, at least to me. The more I thought I knew, the more I realized in many ways I just felt like I was still in the shallow end of the kiddie pool. In the last couple days on the radio, I put together the most of this in the last couple days. But on the radio, on KZRG, they had this ad, and it's one of the guys that are advertising to get more people to come in and advertise with them. But he's quoting Mark Twain. The quote is, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." Here's what I do know. Our church has a motto. Now, without looking at it, who can tell me what it says? Then don't. Who knows the motto? Every week you pick it up. Go ahead, George. It's found on the logo right above the top of the tree, and it's right on the cover of your bulletins every week. A family of friends embracing truth over tradition. Are we a family of friends? I would like to think we are. We're friendly enough. We all like each other, I hope. Okay, but do we embrace God's truth over man's traditions? I think we strive for that. So we've got two paths, easy and hard, right and wrong, straight and narrow or broad and wide, be a peculiar people or go along with the crowd. Choose the light burden or be heavy laden, a blessing or cursed, life or death. Seems like a no-brainer to me. Joshua 24, 14 through 15. Now, therefore, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your fathers, that your fathers served on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Shalom Aleichem.